So every April 1st, we all get this kind of free pass, right? A license for mischief, a day for hoaxes. But have you ever really stopped and wondered why? Why this one specific day dedicated to the art of the prank? Well, that's exactly what we're going to get to the bottom of today. You know the feeling. You wake up on April 1st, you're scrolling on your phone, and suddenly the internet just feels a little bit weird. Your favorite brands are launching these totally bizarre products, the headlines seem just a little too wild to be true, and for a second you question pretty much everything. It's become this day of sanctioned chaos in our digital world. And oh boy, do companies get in on the action. I mean, we've seen T-Mobile joking about a cologne that smells like a brand new phone. Omaha Steaks unveiled a pocket-sized steak that cooks with motion. There was even a company that pitched a high-fashion clothing line made from real cat hair. It's all harmless, totally bizarre, and honestly, a huge part of the modern tradition. Okay, but all this stuff, it really begs the question, right? Beyond all the corporate marketing and the silly gags we play on each other, what's the actual point? Where did this strange tradition of tricking each other even come from in the first place? All right, so to figure this all out, here's the plan. First, we're going to play detective and investigate the day's super mysterious origins. Then, we'll take a quick trip around the globe to see how other cultures do it. We'll also look at how the media basically perfected the big-time hoax. And finally, we'll ask a pretty serious question. In today's world, is this holiday still just a harmless joke? Let's dive right in. And honestly, the most fascinating thing about April Fool's Day is its own punchline. Nobody is 100% sure how it started. Seriously, historians have been debating this for centuries, which is kind of the perfect backstory for a holiday that's all about confusion and messing with people. Okay, so the most common story you'll hear takes us way back to 16th century France. See, for a long, long time, a lot of Europe celebrated the New Year around the first day of spring, with parties that usually wrapped up around April 1st. But then, everything changed. So, in 1564, the French king, Charles IX, officially switched to the Gregorian calendar, moving New Year's Day to January 1st. Now, you gotta remember, this is an age with no internet, no 24-hour news. News traveled slow. So, people who didn't get the memo, or maybe were just a little stubborn, kept celebrating in April. These folks were considered old-fashioned fools, and people started playing pranks on them, like sticking a paper fish to their backs. They were called poisson d'avril, or April fish, a symbol for a young, gullible fish that's super easy to catch. But, and this is a big but, here's where that neat little story starts to unravel. A Flemish poet wrote a poem about a nobleman sending his servant on a bunch of silly errands on April 1st, all the way back in 1561. That's 3 years before France officially changed its calendar, so the tradition of pulling pranks on April 1st was already a thing. The plot thickens. All right, so if the calendar mix-up isn't the whole story, maybe we need to look even further back. Like, way further back. Our next clue takes us all the way to ancient Rome and their pretty wild spring festivals. You see, at the end of March, Romans celebrated a festival called Hilaria. And I mean, the name kind of gives it away, right? Hilaria. It was a day for pure, well, hilarity. People would wear disguises, make fun of their friends and neighbors, and even dress up as government officials. It was just this day of joyful, sanctioned chaos, where all the normal rules went out the window for a bit. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Okay, our last big historical clue comes from one of the giants of English literature, Geoffrey Chaucer and his famous book, The Canterbury Tales, written way, way back in 1392. This is actually the earliest potential reference to the holiday we've got. In one of the stories, a very vain rooster gets tricked by a clever fox, and the poem says this happened 32 days since March began, which, if you do the math, is April 1st. So you'd think, aha, we've got it. But hold on. Most scholars today think this was just a typo made by a scribe centuries ago, and that Chaucer probably meant 32 days after March ended, which is May 2nd. So it looked like a smoking gun is probably another dead end. And this is what I find so perfect. It's like the punchline to the holiday's own origin story. Even back in 1760, people were already writing about the fact that nobody really knew why they were celebrating April Fool's Day. The origin of the day is the ultimate prank on all of us. So even though nobody really knows where it came from, this tradition just took off and spread all over the world. But it didn't look the same everywhere. Not at all. It got tweaked and reshaped by all these different cultures. So let's take a look at how the rest of the world puts its own spin on April 1st. Over in France, they still love that classic Poisson d'avril, or April fish tradition. It's mostly a thing for kids these days, and it's super charming and innocent. The fish isn't just about being gullible, it's also a little nod to the zodiac sign Pisces, the fish, which the sun is just leaving around that time of year. It's a playful way to say goodbye to winter.
But of course, you can count on Scotland to take it to the next level. For them, one day of pranking? Nah, that's not going to cut it. Historically, it was a 2-day bash. Day 1 was Huntigoke Day. Goke is an old word for a cuckoo bird, a classic symbol for a fool. The goal was to send someone on a fool's errand with a sealed note. The note just said to send the fool even further. And then, Day 2 was Taily Day, which was all about, well, pinning tails on people.
And you find all these other cool little rules and traditions all over the place. Like in the UK and Ireland, there's a hard rule. You have to get your pranks in before noon. If you try one in the afternoon, the joke's on you. You're the fool. In Spain and Latin America, the big prank day is actually December 28th. And in Nordic countries, it's a huge tradition for newspapers to publish one really convincing but totally fake story for everyone to try and find. And that newspaper tradition, it's the perfect lead-in to our next chapter. Because in the 20th century, things got bigger, way bigger. With the rise of mass media like newspapers, radio, and especially TV, the simple personal prank grew into this massive public performance. The media gave us some of the most legendary hoaxes ever. You had Sports Illustrated convincing people there was this rookie pitcher who could throw a baseball at like warp speed. Taco Bell pretended it bought the Liberty Bell, which actually caused a little bit of a panic. And Burger King even advertised a Whopper just for left-handed people. And you know what? A ton of people went in and asked for one. But one hoax, one single broadcast stands head and shoulders above the rest. But we have to talk about the granddaddy of them all. Let's set the scene. It's 1957. TV is still pretty new, and people really, really trust the news. The BBC, the pinnacle of respectable broadcasting, airs its famous news show, Panorama. And on April 1st, they aired a segment that became an absolute legend. And the whole idea was born from this simple little joke from a schoolyard in Austria. A cameraman remembered his teachers teasing him and his classmates that they were so dumb they'd believe spaghetti grew on trees. So he pitched the idea, the BBC ran with it, producing this completely serious documentary-style report showing Swiss farmers harvesting spaghetti right off the branches. And people absolutely bought it. I mean, the phones at the BBC were ringing off the hook. You have to understand, pasta wasn't a common food in Britain back then. So hundreds of people called in. Some were mad, but a lot of them were totally fooled and genuinely wanted to know how they could grow their own spaghetti tree. The BBC's official deadpan response became just as famous as the prank itself. But that whole spaghetti thing worked for one key reason. People trusted the BBC. So, what happens when we're not so trusting anymore? This really brings us to our final and maybe our most important question. What is the role of April Fool's Day in the wild, often confusing world we live in today? You know, psychologically, a good prank can actually be a healthy thing. It's what's called a benign violation. It crosses a line, but in a way that feels totally safe and harmless. It can actually bring people closer. But we all know there's a dark side. When a prank stops being a shared joke and starts being about humiliating someone or punching down, it's not a prank anymore. It's just bullying. But of course, the internet changed the game completely. Now we've got this thing that some people call clout lighting. These are pranks that aren't for a private laugh. They're designed to go viral. They're for clicks and views and engagement. And when that's the goal, the feelings or dignity of the person being pranked can easily get left behind. And that's really the big question we're left with, isn't it? We live in a world that already feels like April Fool's Day sometimes. We have to deal with misinformation, AI deepfakes, and fake news constantly. So in that kind of environment, is a day that's dedicated to deception still a harmless bit of fun? Or is it a tradition that's maybe become a little dangerous? It's definitely something to think about. I'm genuinely curious what you think. Has April Fool's Day had its day? Or is it more important than ever to have a laugh? Let us know down in the comments. And if you liked digging into the weird history of our traditions, make sure you subscribe for more.